Hello, everyone. Welcome to our channel. Today, we are going to dive deep into a story from Buddha's teachings, exploring the true meaning of effort and why it's crucial to understand its nature if we want to live a life of fulfillment and peace. The title of today's story is The True Meaning of Effort: How to Find Fulfillment Without Obsession. If you resonate with the story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Let's begin. The story begins in the vast lands of ancient India, near the peaceful waters of the Ganges River. There stood a tall, ancient tree, weathered by many years of wind and rain. Beneath its shade, a young boy named Ramesh sat, worn out from his daily labor. He had worked tirelessly since he was a child, helping his family make a living. But today, something was different. There was a deep sadness in his eyes, and his heart felt heavy. Why do I keep working so hard but feel so unfulfilled? Ramesh thought to himself. Despite the pride he felt in supporting his family, he couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. Day after day, he worked harder, but it seemed like nothing ever changed. Suddenly, a gentle voice broke the silence behind him. "Young man, where does your suffering come from?" Ramesh turned around in surprise. Standing before him was a monk, humble in appearance, yet radiating a calm and warmth that made Ramesh feel at ease. "Who are you?" Ramesh asked. "I am Buddha," the monk replied. "I travel to many places, listening to the voices of people's hearts." Ramesh's heart skipped a beat. He had heard the name of Buddha in the village before, and he never imagined that the wise teacher would stand before him today. "Why did you speak to me?" Ramesh asked. "I see a deep sorrow in your eyes," Buddha replied. "What weighs on your heart? Would you like to talk about it?" For a moment, Ramesh hesitated, but then he nodded slowly. He began to share his struggles, how he worked tirelessly for his family but never felt recognized, how he constantly compared himself to others and felt inferior, and how, despite all his efforts, he felt more and more lost. Buddha listened quietly. After a brief pause, he gently spoke. "Ramesh, the suffering in your heart is like the clouds that cover the night sky. But if you clear those clouds, you will see the moon shining brightly. Inside you, there is that same clarity and peace." Ramesh was puzzled. "But my efforts, are they meaningless?" "No, your efforts are valuable," Buddha replied. "However, your suffering arises when you compare yourself to others and become obsessed with the results. This is where your suffering is born." Ramesh's eyes widened. He had never thought about it that way. Could it be that his obsession with comparison and results was causing his pain? The lesson in the flowing river. Buddha smiled softly. "Your efforts are noble, but when your heart becomes tied to the outcome or when you compare yourself to others, you become trapped. The key is to understand that your effort should not be bound by external recognition or results. It should flow naturally, like the water in the river." "Come with me tomorrow," Buddha suggested. "We will go to the river, and the flowing water will teach you what you need to know." The next morning, Ramesh met Buddha near the riverbank. The air was cool and crisp, and the village was still quiet. As they walked to the river, Buddha spoke again. "Look at the water. What do you see?" Ramesh observed the river, watching the water flow smoothly over the stones, sometimes swirling, sometimes still, but always moving forward. "What do you see?" Buddha asked again. "The water flows forward, no matter what obstacles it faces," Ramesh said, reflecting on the sight. "Exactly," Buddha said, nodding. "The river doesn't struggle, it simply flows. But sometimes, just like the water, we struggle against the natural flow of life. We try to control it, to compare ourselves, and in doing so, we create turmoil in our hearts. But if we stop trying to control the flow and accept the natural rhythm of life," Buddha continued, "we find peace." Ramesh thought deeply about Buddha's words. For the first time, he realized that his efforts had been clouded by comparison and a desire for external validation. The importance of effort without attachment. But if I stop trying, won't I get nowhere? Ramesh asked, confused. Buddha smiled and picked up a small stone from the ground. He tossed it into the river, watching as it sank, creating ripples in the water. Effort is like this stone, Buddha explained. It creates ripples, but if you become attached to the ripples, you lose sight of the flow of the river. Your efforts should not be weighed down by the desire for recognition or results. Like the river, let your efforts flow naturally, and they will carry you forward. Ramesh thought about this deeply. His efforts had often been weighed down by the need for approval or success. But now he understood that true fulfillment came from letting go of those attachments. But how do I begin to change? Ramesh asked. Buddha placed his hand on Ramesh's shoulder. The first step is to observe yourself. Look at how you are struggling against the flow. Recognize it, and allow yourself to go with the current of life. The lesson in the marketplace. The next day, Buddha took Ramesh to the bustling market of Liso. It was a busy place, filled with vendors selling fruit, spices, and animals, and the air was thick with the sounds of bargaining and haggling. Walk freely through the market, Buddha said. Observe what you see and feel. Pay attention to your inner reactions. Ramesh walked through the market, observing the people around him. He saw a fruit vendor bargaining for a better price, a young man struggling to sell his goods, and an old woman looking defeated by her day's sales. He noticed how all these people were driven by the desire for success, to outdo one another, and to achieve results. Ramesh was taken aback. It was like seeing himself in all these people. He felt their struggle and frustration as if it were his own. Suddenly, a merchant approached him. If you want to sell your cow, come this way. Ramesh, curious, followed the merchant to a group of buyers. He began negotiating a price, but the buyers offered a much lower price than he expected. Anger rose in his chest. How could they undervalue my cow like this? He thought. His heart pounded in his chest as he argued with them, but the merchants merely laughed and ignored him. Returning to Buddha, Ramesh felt defeated. I tried my best to negotiate, but they laughed at me. How can there be fulfillment in a world like this? Buddha looked at him calmly. What did you see in the market? I saw people competing, comparing themselves, and fighting for results, Ramesh replied. They were all focused on gaining something for themselves. Exactly, Buddha said. As long as people are driven by comparison and the need for results, there will be no true fulfillment. But you do not need to be caught up in this cycle. Ramesh was still confused. But I work for my family's sake. I cannot stop. Buddha smiled softly. You do not need to stop working. Just change the way you approach your effort. Do it not for others' approval, but for the joy and meaning it brings to you. The peaceful night under the full moon. That evening, Buddha invited Ramesh to sit with him on a hill under the full moon. The night was still, and the cool wind rustled through the trees. Look at the moon, Buddha said. What do you feel when you gaze at it? Ramesh looked at the moon, feeling a sense of calm and quiet strength. It's beautiful, he said, but more than that, it feels peaceful. There is a quiet power in it. Exactly, Buddha said with a smile. In that peace, there is wisdom. Your heart, too, can become like this moon, still, clear, and radiant. But my mind is filled with distractions, Ramesh admitted. I still think about the merchants, my failure, and the anger I felt. I can't seem to let go of it. Buddha nodded. That is the nature of the mind. It often clings to past events or worries about the future. But there is a way to free yourself from these attachments. The key is meditation. Meditation? Ramesh asked, curious. Yes, Buddha replied. Meditation is the practice of observing your mind, of seeing your thoughts and emotions without becoming attached to them. When you meditate, you begin to understand the flow of your thoughts and release the ones that cause suffering. Buddha instructed Ramesh to close his eyes and focus on his breathing. Feel each breath as it enters and leaves your body. When your mind wanders, simply notice it and return your attention to your breath. At first, Ramesh found it difficult. His thoughts kept drifting back to the market, to the frustration he had felt earlier that day. But slowly, he began to notice his thoughts without getting lost in them. He focused on his breath, and gradually, the anger and disappointment faded away. In its place, a deep sense of peace began to fill his heart. Do not worry if your mind wanders. Buddha's voice echoed gently in his mind. Just notice it and let it go. Like clouds passing through the sky, your thoughts will dissipate. The conclusion. When Ramesh opened his eyes, he felt a sense of calm he had never experienced before. I feel lighter, he said, looking at Buddha with a new understanding. That is the power of meditation, Buddha explained. By observing your mind and letting go of attachments, you create space for peace and wisdom to enter. The next day, Ramesh returned to his daily work with a new perspective. He still worked hard for his family, but now he did so with joy and fulfillment, not for recognition or success. As time passed, Ramesh shared his newfound wisdom with others, teaching them to find peace in their efforts and to let go of the need for external validation. The village began to transform. People focused on their actions rather than their outcomes, and a peaceful harmony spread throughout the community. Years later, Ramesh sat under the same tree where he had once struggled, now a wise and calm man. Buddha appeared before him once again, smiling. You have come a long way, Ramesh, Buddha said. Ramesh kneeled before him. Thank you, Master. Your teachings have changed my life. Buddha smiled gently. The teachings are only the beginning. It is you who must walk the path and continue to grow. And so, Ramesh continued to walk his path, sharing his wisdom with others, and spreading peace wherever he went. Final words. This story teaches us the true meaning of effort, that it is not the result or the recognition that brings us fulfillment, but the sincerity and joy we find in the effort itself. Like Ramesh, we can learn to free ourselves from the constant cycle of comparison and attachment to results. True peace comes when we let go of the need for external validation and simply focus on the present moment and the meaning of our actions. If you found this story meaningful, remember to subscribe and share it with others who might benefit from it. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.